Thank you for tuning in to another episode of One More Story. We are back and hoping to reach even more listeners in Season 2, so please, if you are enjoying the show, be sure to leave us a review and share with your friends. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's episode. My guest tonight is Emily Pendergast. She is an actress, writer, best known for her work in VEEP, The Conners, We're Doing Good, and she just popped up on an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, good. I'm happy to have you on. We're doing a season 2 of this. I've taken a little hiatus, and so you're one of the first batch of the new, and it's
No pressure.
no, it's good. I'm rusty too, so I have to kind of shake off the cobwebs. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about. Well, first of all, I watched the first episode of We're Doing Good because it was only 10 minutes and I didn't have a ton of time, and I wanted to.
It's nice and digestible.
And I love. Do you compost?
No, so that Alvira is the writer-director of that, and she and her husband Sam, who is the DP, or her boyfriend Sam was the DP, that is a real story of them moving to LA.
Oh my God.
And because they drove so far to try to compost. And from New York, I guess it's very easy in New York. I've never lived in New York.
Right.
But I guess it's very easy to compost. Not so much here.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you have to, if you live in an apartment, it is difficult unless you have. Have you seen those Lomies? You've seen those ads?
Those like little bucket things.
Well, what they are is it's like a $500 piece. It's this giant thing. One of my friends and neighbors who lives down the street from me, or lived down the street, he moved. He didn't take it with him, and I have it. It's on loan. I also have my own. I have a compost bin in the backyard, so I compost. And so
That's great.
Well, I understand the struggle though. It's disgusting,
Yeah,
and
and the things you can and can't compost.
yeah, no meat. You definitely.
No meat.
No, you can't do meat. But the thing with the lomi is you think so. If you're listening to this podcast and you have no idea what we're talking about, Emily has a web series called We're Doing Good. And why don't you tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll get into composting because that's the first episode.
Yeah. So Alvira wrote and directed We're Doing Good, and it was so cool. It went to South by 2 years ago now, so that was really cool to like see it there. And it's about Miles and Nora, and I play Nora, and they're a young couple and just like very heightened day-to-day things. And Nora is one of those people that wants to do really great. She wants to do really good, but she also wants everyone to know how good she's doing, so she wants to post about it. And so a lot of it is, no, we have to do this because I already posted about it because I said I was going to go to this thing. And so it's very performative.
Well, and it's so realistic because we know so many people, especially living in LA, who
Yeah.
are these people.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
without naming names, did you model your character after anyone in particular, or was
Yeah, we'd be here for a while if I named names. Yeah, I mean, we know so many. There's this one, I think it might be the third episode. My husband can't watch it because he gags a lot, but it's all about like that, like it's like a cheese whiz challenge, like
Ugh.
raising awareness for veganism. And so like you have to like chug a bottle of cheese whiz, and I get so sick. I'm just sweaty and like barfing.
Oh, I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, just because, and then it's like the ingredients are like animal byproducts.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, because here's the thing. Look, and I fall victim to this myself. I have a compost bin, and
That's
I
great.
try to do some good things, but there's so much bad that sort of negates. So I love the fact that you guys drive around and waste a ton of gas
Yeah,
to do that. And
for sure.
I mean, you look at just everything we own, especially in America, like we all have iPhones. I mean, if you really wanted to do a deep dive on the origin of all the materials that, went into making your iPhone and the labor and stuff, you probably,
Pretty dark.
It's probably pretty dark, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to afford an iPhone if it was completely manufactured and made in
Right.
America with.
And then you couldn't post about your compost bin if you didn't have an iPhone.
Yes. So I like, I I definitely felt like it resonated. What's going on with the show? Are you guys gonna continue to do more episodes or turn it into
I would love to. I mean, I'm not sure. We went to South by, and then I know it's every episode is out online
Mhm.
now. So I'm not sure. I mean, there's I don't want to spoil the ending, but there's definitely a world for it. But it. I mean, I guess I could spoil the ending. It's been out. Do you want me to
No,
spoil
because
it?
'cause I'm actually gonna go back and
Okay, great. I won't
watch
do
it
it.
because I really did. It's a nice slice of life because,
Yeah.
especially if you live in LA and you are trying to do some good or people who are trying to do some good, and people who want to document their good
Yes. Yeah.
deeds, it's very, very funny, and so
I
you
agree.
should check it out.
But Elvira is a powerhouse of a writer, director, and she's has, like, a million projects going all the time, and we did another one, it's called SHIT,
Mhm.
On Your Lip, um,
Oh, nice.
and yeah, and it's in Series Fest in May in
Okay.
Denver, so she's awesome.
And what is the premise of that?
Exactly as it sounds.
Wait.
Like, there is there is a person giving an interview, and he has something on his lip, and they can't figure out what it is, and I come over to interview, like, to try to get, like, the hard truth, and it's about, like, exposing the toy industry,
Oh.
and he's trying to take down this toy industry, but no one can take him serious because he has something on his lip, and he won't tell anyone what it is.
Oh my god. That's such a specific and weird.
I know.
She sounds fascinating.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Um, well, so tell me a little bit about your path so far. And so you grew up in Ohio, correct?
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
did
And
you did you do any I was gonna say, did you do any time in Chicago, but did you spend any time
No.
doing it? Because usually that's a natural progression. But tell me a little bit about what brought you out here.
Yeah, I didn't I didn't do any time in Chicago or New York, and I wish there's part of me that I really wish I did, but I grew up in Canfield, Ohio, which is like a suburb of Youngstown,
Hmm.
which is halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And I was just always kind of a weird kid, and I was the youngest. And so like I there's home videos of me having like talk shows dressing my cats up. So and like interviewing them. So I had a lot of time alone because my sisters were older than me. Um, and but I didn't know what, I wanted to do, and I went to college at Ohio University, and I had a million majors, and I finally graduated with one in criminal psychology, which is
Okay.
the direct path to comedy.
Yeah.
So you heard it here first. And so I was like, maybe I'll go to LA. Maybe I'll go to California because my sister lived out here. I was like, I'll go to California. Maybe I'll get my master's. This was all my plan to tell my mom to drive me out here. And I was like, I'll get my master's. And Pete, now you know me in hostage negotiating. Can you imagine? Can you imagine
No.
this cripplingly accommodating woman being like, that's okay. You can have anything you want. Um, so, and then, and I always loved SNL, and I loved all of those, like, comedic, like the comedies, and my cousins are the two funniest people in the world. And so I was waitressing and bartending, and someone was like, you should try groundlings. And I was like, what's that? And so I looked it all up, and a lot of the people that I loved watching on SNL, and that was their common denominator, was groundlings.
Hmm.
So I took a class, and I never looked back, and I just was so happy.
That's awesome. So what was your first sort of moment where you realize, okay, this is a career. This is what I'm gonna be doing.
I think it was a lot of, like, my mom and dad coming out to see me because they're like, "Thought you said you're gonna go to get your master's." And so and I think, I was taking a lot of classes, and then I formed, like, different sketch groups, and we were, performing at, like, a theater next to Jiffy Lube,
Nice.
and they came out and they saw me, and I think people coming up after the show and going like, "You that was great. Like, you're good at this." And I was like, "Whoa, really?" And so that meant a lot. And then I think being in Sunday company at Growlings and that grind of, it's 18 months of pitching every Wednesday and doing new material every Sunday.
Hmm.
And doing that was really helpful for my work ethic because I would bring in like 10 sketches a week, to try to pitch, and a lot of them were terrible. But and then I think through that I got the confidence in to do that. And then I think when I tested for SNL, and that was really like, "Oh my god, I'm doing what I said I wanted to do," and
Wow.
just kind of putting in the work at Groundlings. Like, I can tether everything back to what Groundlings has given to me,
Mhm.
like, just confidence-wise and creative in my voice, like, figuring out my comedic voice-wise. So I think that was helpful to go like, I don't know what is happening with this path, but I know I feel at home here, and I know I feel confident in
Mhm.
this.
And then how did you get Veep? Tell me about that process, because I loved watching you in Veep. I mean, that show is,
Thank you.
I mean, it's so ridiculous, and
It's the greatest.
I mean,
I felt so lucky.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, Dorian Frankel and Sibby Gessner, they were the casting directors, and they were my first theatrical audition ever. It was for Veep, but, like, seasons earlier,
Okay.
and I was, like, had to, like, give someone a LaCroix, and, like, thank God I didn't get that. And so they, I believe, came to industry night and during Sunday Company, and I got called in for that, and I loved the show, so I was a nervous wreck. And Beth was written, I believe, for 1 or 2 episodes, and she was written as, like, this, like, very powerful woman, and, like, just, like, taking the campaign trail, like, on herself, I believe. And then, like, the character got shifted right before I went in. They're like, "She just, like, be, like, out of your depth." And I was like, "Even better." Like, it's, like, perfect. And so I did that, and it was really fun, and I really miss in-person auditions because you get adjusted, and it was really
Me
great to be
too.
in the room, and they're so kind, and they're very, very welcoming office. And then I had a chemistry test with Tim Simons, who is the greatest. And my manager at the time, they were very good friends. So, like, I walked in, and Tim, was like, "Hey, Peter says hey." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's great." And my brain never let me think about Julia being in the room.
Mhm.
Like, I never went there. And so when I walked in and she was like, "Hi, I'm Julia." And I was like, "Jesus Christ. Okay, I know that." Yeah, you're like, "Oh,
Wow.
wow." And we did a couple scenes, and then Julia said, "I have a couple questions for Beth." And we got to improvise a bit, and I was I had so much fun. And I remember leaving and getting into my car and going like, "If nothing else happens, I just got to improvise with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. That's the coolest thing that I've done ever." And so, like, I'm cool no matter what happens here. And then it only got cooler. So, yeah, and then they very selflessly kept bringing me back into scenes and, episodes. They would joke of, like, they would never cut Beth, I guess Dave Mandel would always say, and he's like, "Don't wrap Beth yet." And I would just, like, hang and just, like, come in to different scenes. So it's the greatest. I owe a lot to Dave Mandel. He's just what a gift.
It's such a great show, and although the storylines, you know, stopped seeming so ridiculous as American politics got progressively more ridiculous. Like,
Ridiculous. Yeah, I don't it's like, what would they do now?
yeah, I don't.
Like, it's all yeah,
It's,
it's terrifying. I forget what season it was, but, like, when the president is tweeting,
hmm
that was, like, one of, like, the big moments in one of the episodes. And I was like, "Oh, that is nothing."
No, yeah, absolutely not. I haven't watched it since it ended, so I think I need to go back and give it a rewatch. But I just love how just every character, even just the entire ensemble, just everyone was so delightfully nasty.
Yes. Yeah, and then they do that thing, what I think is my favorite thing that characters do of they're awful people, and then the moment you feel bad for them, they, like, smack you across the face for feeling bad for them? Like,
Yeah, I mean, even Matt Walsh's character, I think there were a couple times where you actually start to feel bad for him, but then.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, that whole cast, it was their last season, they didn't have to welcome me in as graciously as they did, and they were all so kind, and it was the coolest thing.
That's great. And so the most recent thing, you were just on the season finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Fantastic
Yes.
job.
I snuck right in there at the end.
Yeah, so are there no scripts? How does that work?
None.
None. You just
None. Yeah, and you get a paragraph. And so when I my self-tape I guess back in the day, like, when you would audition in person, they
Mhm.
were different. I'm not sure if Larry was in the room or not, but I know that, I was doing self-tapes for the last 4-ish years for Curb, and
Wow.
so my husband had who has no improv experience, had to improvise with me as Larry.
Oh god.
And so and it's not a great quality. I become pretty unrecognizable while I do self-tapes. I'm like, "Don't look at me." Like, and, and so he had to improvise with me, and it was just, like, the setup of, like, you need to tell Larry to turn his phone off, and he wants to know who squealed, and I think that's it.
Wow.
It was so intimidating and cool. It just feels like you're getting, like, shot out of a cannon. I couldn't it was awesome.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like you blocked it without really I don't think we improvised, like, during blocking,
Mhm.
and then it was just kinda like you let it rip.
That's amazing. And so you're talking about self-tape versus in person, and I know some actors who love self-taping,
Phew.
and I am not one of them. I
No.
feel like it was what propelled me to go, "All right, you know what? I think writing, directing is a better path." Yeah, I need to be in that room and feed off that energy, and it sounds like
Yeah, what I was gonna say, what didn't you like what don't you like about it?
when I perform for others.
Yeah.
I also get a sense of the energy in the room, and the redirect is so important. I mean, that's the main thing is like, you can go in there with an idea, right? And you should go in there with some idea of what you're going to do, but that idea might not be what they're looking for. And then if they just give you a tiny adjustment, you can get right into it. And you can
Totally.
and so to not be able to take adjustments, I think is so detrimental. And again, it's that energy. I'm looser when I see casting there and the director there. It's exciting. It feels real.
Yeah.
It's not me messing around with my tripod and trying to get the lighting right. And the thing that kills me is for commercial, because I still go out commercially. I don't do theatrical anymore, but
Yeah.
they always insist on a full body shot just to
Right.
have, and they also insist that it's horizontal. So the
There's
geog
not a chance.
yeah, so you so it's like it's such a frustrating process trying to set up in a small space, the camera so that it captures your body, and then all of a sudden you're in your kid's bedroom and there's like dirty clothes in the frame, and you're like, I just need to get this full body. And it's just, I don't know. It's just, it's tedious. And look, I don't miss driving to Santa Monica at 4 p.m. on a Friday,
Right.
but yeah, I think
I
the
know.
in-person is important.
I think so too. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, because 'cause you're a director and you're an awesome director too, it's like, I'm sure it's
Thank you.
important to see people take direction
Yeah,
as well, I imagine, and yeah, I mean, I feel like we're humans and we all have different takes on things
right.
and something that hits you in a different way, and then all you need is like, "Oh, no, it's actually like this," and you're like, "Oh, cool, great, thanks." I'm like, I can't imagine how many tapes I've sent in that are just, like, way off the mark.
Oh,
Like
totally. Yeah, and it's again, for me, it's a collaborative process, whether you're a director or whether you're an actor. It's a conversation between director and actor, or casting director and actor, and it's a discovery that you make together. And so if you
Mhm.
take one of those elements out, you don't have that, and you're just in this weird vacuum, where you think you
Yeah.
did it right. Like, and the torturous thing about commercial acting is you'll see occasionally these spots. There's this one spot. It was on the other day. It's been on for 5 years, or
Oh, man.
probably 4, because I self-taped during COVID. I had my son, who was 7 years old at the time, set up the camera for me. and
That's awesome.
and every time the spot comes on, it's a Capital One commercial, and every time it comes
Mhm.
on, he points it out. He's like, "Oh, Dad, that was that job you didn't get." And I'm
Thanks, son.
yeah, and I'm like, "Yeah, I thought I made some decent choices, but I didn't have an opportunity to get a redirect, so,
Yeah,
but good for the guy who got it because they don't
it's
run
running.
yeah, they don't and they rarely run commercials like that. It's like the one commercial that I guess because I'm so aware of it because I auditioned for
Right.
it, but it's been going for like 4 years, which is
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah, and it is that thing too, I find, like, it's so hard because I feel like it's very easy to try to become a perfectionist with these tapes too and go
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I messed up that one thing," and it's like, "Well, no, you can't
yeah.
try." Like, I'm like, I give myself an allotted amount of time, and, like, and then I just have to be done with it because I could, of course, spend so much time doing it.
Yeah, and I watched a lot of self tapes casting
Yeah.
my movie, and I definitely being on the other side of it, I was very impressed by the ones that were great because it's challenging,
Yeah.
and so the actors that are able to pull it off, those are the ones that are continuing to work.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are you working on now? What's the latest?
What am I working on? I just closed a show at Groundlings.
Nice.
So we did like a 3-month run of a show. So I closed that, and I'm going to teach improv and sketch in France for a few weeks.
Whoa.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm packing just slowly but surely, and also because I have a new puppy, and so everything I put on the ground will get eaten.
Yes.
So everything is just like I have like converters up on top of my dresser, and so. But yeah, I'm very very excited.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Well, very cool. Well, this is a question I ask all my guests because this is a bedtime podcast. How do you wind things down at night and quiet your mind and get a good night's sleep?
well, I am unfortunately an insomniac,
Okay.
so I need better nighttime hygiene. But what I do every night is my husband likes to sleep with the TV on, and it's very bright, so I have blackout eye masks, so I look
Same.
like a lunatic,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, I
so
have.
I have an eye
Yeah.
mask. Yeah, and then I always listen to audiobooks
Okay.
or podcasts.
Well,
So I too listen to stories to help wind down, and then I fall asleep and I don't remember where I was in the book.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
but
I
that's
have a podcast
great.
I can recommend.
Oh my, what is it called?
It's called One More Story.
I will have to write that down.
Yeah, yeah, you'll have to check that out. I don't know, would
Yes,
you actually be able to fall asleep to your own story? I can't fall
not
asleep
a
to
chance.
yeah, no, because 'cause I'd be
No.
giving myself notes,
Right.
and I'd
Right,
be
right. There are podcasts that I can't listen to because they make me laugh,
wow,
or but yeah, Corey will if I fall asleep, he'll, like, roll over and it'll be, like, a dark podcast, and he'll be like, "No wonder this girl can't sleep." Like,
I mean, do you, take any melatonin or sleepy time tea or anything, or
I've tried it
you
all.
tried
The
it all?
only thing that really works is acupuncture for
Whoa,
me, and it's great.
but can you do that
So,
to
yeah.
yourself?
No, God,
Yeah,
I would
just
I
do
would look
like
like
I mean
what is that? The cover of the book or the cover of the movie that I'm thinking with the
oh,
pins all in it?
Hellraiser.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
That's what I feel like I would look like.
so you go to a place, you get acupuncture, and then that night you sleep better?
Usually that the same day, yeah, you sleep a lot better, but it lasts.
Oh,
So it, like, goes throughout. Yeah, they're, like, tracking your body.
interesting.
Um, yeah, but it's really that was really helpful. Otherwise, it's just, chugging NyQuil, which isn't good.
No, I don't think that's good for you long
I
term.
don't recommend it. No.
That could be habit forming.
Yeah, don't do that.
Alright. Well, are you ready to dive into a couple of, bedtime stories?
Yes, I'm very excited.
Alright. So, the word is paint. Once upon a time, there was a young boy named Carl. And Carl loved art. And Carl, from a very early age, started obviously with finger painting. As a kid, he would make big messes. He would start on the paper that his mother would lay out for him, and eventually his paintings would migrate over to floors and walls and rugs and Nana's favorite pillow that she had passed on. And Carl's mother was very upset that Carl got paint on that pillow. But from an early age, she understood that Carl had a gift, and Carl was not only driven, but he was prolific. And prolific means that he used to do it all the time. And he really wasn't interested in anything else. His parents tried to take him outside to just get some fresh air, maybe a little vitamin D. He was a pasty young fellow on account of the fact that he stayed in his room mostly and painted. And by age 5, he had stopped painting with his fingers, and his Nana, having forgiven him for painting on her favorite pillow that she had passed on to him, got him a set of paintbrushes. So Carl began painting with his paintbrushes. And again, he would paint on some paper. His mom got him some canvases. His dad thought it might be interesting to take some of the old scraps that they had in the garage. They weren't really good at throwing things out in Carl's family. The dad was a little bit of a hoarder, and he would do these projects around the house, and there would always be leftover wood and metal and things like that. And he always thought, I'm gonna put that scrap metal and wood to good use one day, and I don't know what that is. And Carl's mom always would get on his dad about not cleaning up the garage, and she got very frustrated with him because she didn't know what he was going to use that for, and he didn't know what he was going to use that for, until one day he saw Carl, painting on his canvas as he always did. And he had been watching a documentary on PBS about found object art and thought, what? I've got all that junk in my garage. I wonder if Carl could make something out of that and paint it and make that trash beautiful again. So he said to his wife, Janet. Her name was Janet. His name was Bill. Bill said to Janet, Janet, I have a solution for the junk problem in the garage. And she said, well, Bill, what's that solution? Well, I'm going to tell Carl what the solution is, and we're going to surprise you for Mother's Day.
Janet had a hard time believing this. All of this junk in the garage was going to be cleaned up. What a dream. Bill said, you're going to believe it when you see it. Now get inside and relax, because Carl and I have something to do. So Bill walked over to Carl, who was sitting on his painted Nana pillow. He sat on that for comfort while he painted on his canvas. And he was in the state of flow, just creating beautiful art. Carl was an old soul, to match his old name. And Bill tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, bud, do you want to come into the garage with me? I have something to show you. And Carl, snapping out of his art stupor, said, Dad, I thought I was never really allowed in the garage because all of your projects are in there. He said, well, now this is going to be our project. So Carl capped his paints. All the paints needed capping so they wouldn't dry out. He capped his paints, and he stood up and he glanced at his painted Nana pillow, and he said he'll keep it in the grass. So he walked into the garage with his dad, and his dad pulled back a burlap curtain. He had hidden all of the wood and the metal behind a curtain, thinking that out of sight, out of mind. He pulled it back, and Carl said, "Big whoop, what is this? This is all trash." And his dad said, "Look beyond the trash. What could you do with it? Think of purpose. You're prolific." This was the first time that Carl had ever heard his dad say this to him. He had a word of the day calendar, so he knew what prolific meant. So it meant a lot to him to hear his dad say this. Carl went up and started touching all of the dusty metal and the splintered wood, and he said, "Ow, gosh, Dad, are you trying to give me splinters?" And he said, "No, son. This is your new medium. I'd like you to make some art with this. You've done the canvas, you've done the pillows, you've done the finger painting, you've done the papers. What you haven't done is what I saw in this PBS documentary, and I think you can do this." Carl lifted a giant piece of metal. It must have been for a barn door frame. And his 5-year-old body had pulled this outside so he could see it in the sun. And just then he saw the sun hit the corner piece of the metal and started to make the orangey rust look gold. And his dad knelt down next to him and said, "Your mom has been on me about all of this trash. Shall we make this into a treasure? Mother's Day is right around the corner." And Carl took his dad's hands, his face in his hands, and said, "That sounds perfect, Papa. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll even let you touch my paintbrushes."
Well, Bill was flattered because Carl didn't let anyone touch his paintbrushes. They were sacred paintbrushes to Carl. So he felt like this was a real moment. This was a real bonding moment. Because, if you remember, Carl was pretty much a solitary artist. He was a one-man show. This wasn't a team sport, this painting endeavor. Carl spent hours and hours by himself in his room working on his masterpieces. He didn't have any friends. He barely saw his parents, only when he came out for meals and occasionally passing them in the hallways. And so for Carl to let his father into his sacred painting circle was a big deal. And that moment was not lost on Bill. If you're a dad and your kid actually wants to hang out with you, it means a lot. So Bill started painting, and he dipped the paintbrush in some magenta paint, and he made the first stroke on that metal door. And Carl said, "Whoa, that is not proper technique, Dad." And Bill was like, "Carl, buddy, are you really going to micromanage me and ruin this moment? This is a chance for us to create something together for Mom." And he said, "Yeah, no, I understand that, Dad, but you got to understand too, there's only one captain on this ship, okay? And that's Captain Carl. And if we're going to do this, I need to be the creative director of this project." And Bill was like, "I'm 46 years old and you're 7 years old. I really think I can, lead the charge on this." So they bickered back and forth like children for a good 30 minutes until finally Bill was just exhausted. And as any parent who's ever argued with their child for any length of time knows, sometimes you just give up. So he let Carl lead the way. And they got to painting, and it was wonderful. And Bill realized as they were painting this giant piece of metal that Carl really was the more qualified captain of this ship. And what they painted was a beautiful portrait of Carl's mother. And they really worked together, and it was kind of abstract. There were a lot of different colors going on, and Carl was really into outer space as well. A lot of his there's a running motif in a lot of his work. There were a lot of stars, and he was very much inspired at the beginning by Van Gogh's Starry Night, and he kind of took that and ran with it. And then he had a book on the solar system, and so it was this really interesting portrait of his mother in outer space, standing next to
A ladder made of all of the wooden pieces, and each rung had a part of his mother that he looked up to and loved. One part was her selflessness. One part was her ability to make the silliest shaped pancakes in the mornings. One part was her beautiful eyes, and one part was the freedom that she gave him to create. So Bill stepped back, moved by this gorgeous outer space portrait of his mother leaning against a ladder, where when he was looking at it close and adding dots and stripes and forming paint in one area, he couldn't see the big picture. And Carl kept saying, trust it. Just trust the process, Dad. His dad said, Carl, I've told you, I'm 46 years old. I know how to trust the process. And he said, but do you? So all of those words kept ringing through Carl's and Bill's mind while they stepped back and took in this beautiful portrait of his mother. And Bill had one tear fall down his cheek, and Carl looked up and was moved that his father was moved by something that they created together. Because as you know, this was the very first collaboration that Carl has ever done with art. And his father looked at him and said, you know, son, you've been collaborating all along, because although you're painting with just your 2 hands or your 10 fingers, you're painting on the papers that we've given you, the paint that we've given you, the pillow that you stole from Nana. She gifted it to you, but you did ruin it. And he said, ruin? And he said, you're right, made it better. And Carl said, that gives me an idea. He scurried over and he was looking desperately for this pillow. He left it in the grass. He had no idea where it was. That was his creative pillow. That was his safety blanket. How could he ever create anything without that pillow again? And his dad ran over to him and grabbed his shoulder and said, son, the creativity it flowed onto that pillow, but it was in you the whole time. And you made me believe in myself that I could be creative too. You know me, I'm constantly crunching numbers and adding and subtracting and dividing things on calculators. I'm an accountant. And Carl said, Dad, I know that. You tell me all the time. And Carl and his dad realized that you can continue to find beauty in things that have been hidden behind in dusty corners, things that you don't want to get rid of. You can repurpose things that have maybe taken on a different light. Maybe it's an old wooden door. Maybe it's a pair of shoes you've grown out of. If you put a little bit of love and creativity and you step back and you look at it in a new angle, it could become something different. It could mean something more. So as the sun was setting, they called out, Janet, Mom. And Carl said, that's Mom's name? And he said, yeah, but you keep calling her Mom. And Janet came out, tied her robe, and she said, I was just getting ready to take a bath. What could this possibly be? And Carl and his father started to say, Mom, look. And Bill looked at Carl and said, no, you take it away. You're the captain, Carl. You get to be the one that gifts this beautiful gift. So Carl stepped up in front of his dad and he stood his feet strong into the dirt. And this was the first time he'd ever be presenting any art to anyone. And he said, Mom, I'd like you to take a look at my and Dad's creation called
My Mom Is Out of This World. And Janet was so moved. She was moved to tears. She gave Carl a great big hug. She gave Bill a great big hug. And then after her bath, they hung that gigantic piece in the center of the hallway so that every day when she walked by it, she could see it and smile and always know what a gifted and sweet son Carl was. The end. Emily, are you ready for one more story?
Yes.
Okay. The word is plastic.
Once upon a time, there were 3 sisters. They all enjoyed having their own toys, and they took pride in never having a hand-me-down. Their parents always wanted them to have their own individual toys. And one morning, it wasn't a Christmas, it wasn't a birthday, it wasn't an Easter or a Valentine's, no calendar holiday. But one day they woke up and there were 3 wrapped presents, and the mom and dad were sitting with their gorgeous cups of tea, steeping and steaming in their faces, and the tired sisters walked down the steps. Their names were Madeline, and Abby, and Allie. Madeline always felt a little on the outside because she didn't have an A name. And so Madeline came bumping down the steps first, and she said, wiping her tired eyes, "What's this? What are all these presents here?" And her sisters, Abby and Allie, were in tow, and they all looked at each other, and the mom and dad had a smile on their faces. They said, "These are for you. Unwrap these presents." So they went and started to unwrap their presents, and the mom said, be careful. You know, I like to keep that wrapping paper and line all the drawers with them. So be careful, keep those intact. They all just shared a chuckle and said, "We know, Mom." So they started unwrapping, and they looked very confused. They looked at each other. They had seen these toys before. They were not their own, but each other's toys. They were small little dinosaurs and made of plastic. And they'd never played with this certain one because Madeline had Abby's, Abby had Allie's, and Allie had Madeline. And they looked at their parents like, "Is this some kind of sick joke? You've regifted gifts of my sisters. These aren't new. What kind of world are we living in?" Their parents sipped their tea pretty loudly. They had a habit of slurping. And they took a deep breath. They looked at their parents, and the parents looked at the sisters. There was a lesson to be had here, but the sisters were so angry. They were seeing red, and they were unreachable with any lessons. They tossed their dinosaurs on the table and said, "These aren't my presents. These aren't new. I've never had to share. I can't be seen playing with a quote-unquote hand-me-down." And her parents, who realized through talks with other parents at the PTA and different soccer games, who always got a little bit of a side eye, said, "You only buy your kids new presents? Our kids share." And they said, "Well, keep your eyes on your own plate. We parent how we parent." But they realized the night before, maybe it's a good idea if our kids do start sharing. So they looked and looked through all their toy bins. They had hundreds of toys in different rooms, and they collected all the toys, and they each picked a dinosaur. Now, the sisters had finally calmed down, and they were eating at the table, just staring daggers at these dinosaurs. Like, "I'm never gonna play with you. You're my sisters. You've been tainted." And then, all of a sudden, Madeline, the outcast with the M name, picked one piece of egg up with her fork and put it towards the dinosaur's mouth, and looked over at Abby and Allie and said, "What? He's hungry. What am I just supposed not to feed my dinosaur? He's mine now. I better treat him as such." Abby and Allie were very confused, but he was mine, and that was yours. So how can you take care of something that wasn't yours? And Allie, the constant follower, said, "Oh, my dinosaur's hungry too." So she plucked an egg and started feeding it, and Allie followed suit. Now, the sisters were feeding their dinosaurs eggs and laughing when the eggs got stuck on their giant teeth, and even Abby used the little T-Rex hand to claw at his snout to clear an egg. They started to give names to the dinosaurs. Madeline said, "My dinosaur's name is Buck." And Abby said, No, his name was Talon." And she said, "Well, he's mine now, so his name's Buck, but I'll honor that and call him Buck Talon." And the parents got up, started cleaning the dishes, and they looked at their daughters playing with toys that have already existed in this world but have been regifted in a way of finding their own purpose and their own new trajectory. They couldn't have even realized what they taught these 3 girls that have always had everything, but have never had to look at something that has already existed and breathe new life into these dinosaurs. Madeline walked over to her mom and dad and said, "I'm still very confused why you thought it was necessary to wrap presents that already existed. But I imagine you were teaching us a lesson." And her mom and dad slurped their second cup of tea and took a giant deep breath and said, "Madeline, there's always a lesson to be had. We have everything that we could possibly want, but there's a way to continue to love things and to share." And Abby and Allie grabbed their dinosaurs and grabbed Buck. And Abby said, "Madeline, you forgot Buck." "I just called him Buck." And she said, "That's because he's mine now, and you can play with him whenever you want. But Buck will be sleeping in my bed this evening because he's now my dinosaur. And thank you for the path that you gave him and the foundation that you showed to him, and that he's been so loved. And now I can continue to show him love because to me, he's brand new. And we can continue to bring them to tea parties and to egg parties." And Madeline's parents chuckled and laughed about all the money they are going to save because they'll never have to buy a new toy again. Madeline woke up the next morning, pulled the comforter back. It was a Beauty and the Beast comforter. She loved that comforter. And she looked at it and said, "I've been sleeping with this Beauty and the Beast comforter for 3 years now. There's so many other comforters in the world. There's a Snow White comforter. There's a Sleeping Beauty comforter. Wait a minute. Both of my sisters have both of those." So she scurried in, and they had a little crawl space from one closet to one closet that connected all their rooms. Madeline and Abby and Allie were really, they hit the jackpot with childhood. And Madeline woke up both of her sisters and, come here. I have an idea. What if once a week we surprise each other and we go into our toy bin, or we go into our stuffies or our comforters even. Really, Allie, I'd love to have your Sleeping Beauty one. Allie was still waking up and not a morning person. She said, "Madeline, please, one thing at a time." And so she said, "What if once a week we'll do it on Wednesdays? Because anything you do on Mondays never sticks. We'll do it on Wednesday, and we'll each pick a toy and we'll give it to each other so then we can play with a new toy. Since we've never played with them, they're always going to be new. How do you think that would go?" Abby and Allie were like, "Well, I really like all my toys, and I don't know if I'm willing to share them." And Madeline said, "But aren't you having so much fun with your new dinosaurs?" And they said, "Well, you make a really good point. That was just yesterday. How soon I forgot." So come Wednesday, the next following Wednesday, they each met in their little room, and they each hid their toys behind their backs, and they gave each other a new toy to play with. And then Madeline had another idea and saw a spark in Abby and Allie's eyes too. She said, "What if we bring all of our toys, and we can do this with the kids in school? We can all share toys and cut back on plastic waste. Mom and Dad are constantly talking about that. Maybe we can share toys, and they're always going to be new to the person we share them with." So they brought a huge wagon, they pulled it all the way to school, heaping with toys, and they came in, and Mrs. Penner looked at them and said, "Girls, I thought we said 1 toy a day." And she said, "We do, but there's 13 people in this class, and we have a toy for every single one of them." Every student came over and they're like, "Oh my gosh, a My Little Pony. It's made of plastic, and my parents won't let me get one because they're really concerned about climate change. But now I have this new one. This is new for me." And Madeline sat back, arms folded, knowing that she made a difference in her world. The end.